And hello, hello. Yes, I know. There's no thumbnail. That's my fault. I loaded one, but I don't think I loaded it properly because it's still trying to give us the Little Mermaid thumbnail. So we're just going to let Biden with his creepy finger be the thumbnail. And that's probably enough. Here we go. Aha! There we are. So, good morning. It is a control issues edition of the Brushfire Mind. As in, I don't have control issues. I just have control. And you can tell that I have control because I've already hiccuped on a couple of things. Y'all, you really can't, you can't, it's difficult to explain, but even doing like a terrible show takes so much work. It really does. It's difficult to, it's difficult to convey it. Like it really is. Anyhow, so this morning, let me say hello to some people. Jen, first in the chat. So good morning, Jen. And then Jamie Wilbanks, Sean Stryker, Pitt Danny, Scrimshaw Rose, Pancho Ramirez, and then the Sergeant Major, corned beef hash for breakfast. That sounds delicious. Man, I love corned beef hash with fried eggs, nice and runny, a little hot sauce. Let's see, and then Rebel Jack, great name. Megan Anderson Wilbanks, and I think, hold on. Oh, yay! And then Danny from the TPS report giving us some love. Appreciate it. And yeah, okay. So, as Danny points out in the chat, it's a Cam Solo. That's correct. That's right. And I'm going to choose to think of that as some kind of compliment, Star Wars reference, whatever. It's like Han Solo, but it's Cam Solo. So, we're going to talk about a little gaslighting. We're going to talk about the president and how he wants you to believe that the Inflation Reduction Act is reducing inflation, which is interesting. Oh, Willow Bar, good morning. Not Cam So Lonely. I keyed. Well played. We're going to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act and how you could just about guarantee, for example, that when the government names a thing, it's just about everything in existence other than the thing. You know, we've talked before, the Department of Education doesn't actually educate anybody. The Department of Energy doesn't produce a single watt of energy. The Affordable Care Act actually didn't make healthcare more affordable, and so forth and so on, and blah 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 blah. Um, you know, we used to have a thing called the Department of War. You know, and you want to guess what they did? So anyhow, excuse me. Anyhow, so inflation numbers came out. We still got inflation over 8%, and this is something that's been going on for over a year. Okay, which means it's 8% since the last time we had an inflation report, the previous August, which was also, it wasn't quite 8%, but there was still inflation. And here's the thing. If something goes up, let's just say 1% a month, it's not a static 1%. It goes up 1% from the previous 1%. It's why guys like Dave Ramsey and Clark Howard are going to tell you to get out of debt, because of the way debt works. You know, with the student loan thing, that a lot of the student loan kids will go, well, I borrowed $30,000, but I ended up paying right at $100,000 when it was all paid back. And so, yeah, because of the way interest works, it compounds over time, and it can compound for you or it can compound against you. And most people just won't have the discipline to make interest work for them. Unfortunately, inflation works the same way. Let's see. Krista Blevins-Ellington has joined us. Good morning. Good morning. So when inflation is 8%, it's not that it's 8% from just a month ago. It's 8% on top of all the other months where it's been 5, 6, 7, 8% for quite some time now. Yeah. And as Andrea points out in the chat, 8% is totally true. We are in clown world, though. And that's part of the problem, of course, is that's what they tell us the inflation report, the inflation number is on paper. That it's the same metrics that are going to have, that are, like, for example, for jobs reports. Well, you've got the U3 and the U6 and blah, blah, blah. How about you just tell me how many people don't have a job? Well, you're not going to do that, because when you tell me about the millions of people that don't have jobs, but then you try and tell me that, you know, unemployment is 3.9% or whatever they're trying to say it is, I'm going to not believe you because I can do basic math. So let's just start with, this is, like I was telling you guys, this is much more challenging to do by yourself. Let's start, here we go. Let's start here. This is from Trading Economics, okay? Steve Lowry says, do the 5, do the 5, do the 5, do the 5. I don't know what you mean, Steve. And I'm going to not look at the chat for a moment, because I am going to look at this article, and we're going to go through some of these numbers. Here we go. The annual inflation rate in the U.S. eased for a second straight month to 8.3% in August of 2022, the lowest in 4 months, from 8.5% in July, but above market forecasts of 8.1%. You know, that sentence all by itself is amazing to me, because when your inflation eases, and it eases to somewhere at 8%, that ain't good. Like, we're desperate for good news. We're desperate for good news. And then, of course, the market only forecast 8.1%. So basically, everybody thought, you know, inflation's going to be about 8%. We're not doing well. And one of the reasons why And we'll roll over to Biden talking about this shortly. But one of the reasons why inflation was obvious and easy to forecast as being high is because we're continuing to spend too much money. The Inflation Reduction Act, ironically enough, and then all the other things that the Biden. Haha! I'm just going to stop doing that. Stop trying to correct that Freudian slip because it is what it is. But all the things that were predictable about it are because of all the policies coming out of the Biden administration. When you spend a bunch of money and you increase the money supply, you're going to cause additional inflation. I don't know how deep we got into this the other day as we were talking about some of these things, but I'm really coming to reject a lot of these smarmy economic terms like an acceptable rate of inflation, for example, and good debt, that kind of thing. It's like, who says there has to be debt at all? Who says there has to be inflation at all? Now, sure, an economy that is functioning the way an economy is supposed to function is going to be highs and lows and everything else. Like that's going to happen. And if there's an emergency situation and we need to borrow money, that's going to happen. But the fact that it has to be a regular matter of course, no, I'm summarily reject that. I'm just not going to go with that premise anymore. And it's like everything else. The government, the oligarchy, the people in charge, however you want to put it, they've gotten you so used to certain things, it hadn't even occurred to you to question them. And then, actually, I am going to respond to something in the chat because the Sergeant Major says good debt is called leverage. That's a totally separate concept. At least to me, I understand the point that you're getting to. But when you're leveraging things, now we're talking about borrowing money to make more money, and I think we can say that that's not what the U.S. government does. And besides, we're not even really borrowing the money. I mean, we're borrowing money, but we're also printing money. It's a hot mess. We're not acting like a Wall Street firm where we're going to leverage ourselves out at like say an 8-to-1 ratio with predictable results. Instead, we're just going to continue. We're going to continue making a mess. So here we go. Back to the article. The energy index increased 23.8%, below 32.9%. That's your energy. That's your and that's your dear Europe. This is in your future. That's your, what does it cost to not freeze to death in your home? Okay, that's that cost. Smaller increases were reported for gasoline cost 25.6% versus 44%, and fuel oil 68.8% versus 75.6%, while inflation sped up for natural gas 33 versus 30.5, and electricity 15%. On the other hand, inflation for food rose 11.4, the most since 1979. Food, one of the things you need to not die. Yeah, that went up almost 16% in cost. But hey, look, it's fine. It's fine. We signed the Inflation Reduction Act. It's fine. On the other hand, inflation, let's see, shelters, 6.2%, the most since 1984. Used cars and trucks, 7.8%. Compared to the previous month, consumer prices were up 0.1%, following a flat reading in July and compared to forecast of a 0.1% drop. Meanwhile, core CPI, that's the Consumer Price Index, which includes volatile energy and food prices, increased 6.3% on a year and most since March, and the most since March, and markedly up from 5.9% hit in both June and July. Jen in the comments says, Eggs are $3.99 for a dozen. Yeah, I remember it was just a few years ago when eggs were 99 cents a dozen. They were one of those things that you could buy. Even if you were broke, you could get a dozen eggs. So let's go down. Here we go. Now, here's the first thing that I want to get to. We went through all those numbers, and I know numbers are tough in a broadcast. Not that I don't think that you guys can handle them. It's that they have a tendency to be boring, and even really intelligent people can only get hit with so many numbers before we just kind of start to glaze over and. But here's the first thing I'm going to ask. The official inflation report is 8%. Okay. But gas is double that, and food is 1.5 times that, and in fact, almost every metric was way over 8%. So how is inflation officially only 8%? Now, I'm sure that there's some reason, and if I were to ask that question of some Harvard-educated economist that look down their nose at me and say, actually, it's because we calculate the blah, 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 blah. Okay, fair enough. You mean it's kind of like that U3, U6 thing? It's basically a lie, which probably doesn't surprise you guys one bit to hear. In fact, I bet a bunch of you have already come to that conclusion. But what do you think the real number is? Let's see. Now, here we go. We're going to listen to the mumbler in chief. Rebel Jack says, are those eggs from a grocery store? Because a dozen eggs from a reproductive specialist are way more than $4 a dozen. Anyhow, let's listen to the loser briefly.
$50 billion reduction. And for this fiscal year, $1.5 trillion reduction in the deficit. So I don't want to hear it anymore about big spending Democrats. We spend, but we pay. Ladies and gentlemen, the last guy had this job. Well, let me put it this way. This bill finally delivers on a promise that I've made to the American people for decades. But Republicans choose not to join us.
Hey, there we go. Does anybody think a teleprompter's hidden behind those sunglasses of his? So they can just like show him the words directly, so he can do all that walking around and pointing with his finger. And he talks about how the deficit has gone down. You want to talk about like just peak gaslighting? He's going to look you right in the face and say the deficit has gone down. That because the government is spending more money on prescription drugs. Look, it's actually going to make things cheaper. I mean, Obama pulled the same lie. Basically, the government's going to get involved in the health insurance market, and it's going to make things cheaper. And if you like your doctor, you're gonna be able to keep your doctor and all that good stuff. Because well, he couldn't sell Obamacare by telling the truth. And that's a feature of the Democrats. If they tell you what they really think, what they really want, that they're okay with things being more expensive, that they're okay, for example, like when they said, gasoline should be more expensive and coal should be more expensive, whatever it takes to roll over to a green energy economy. That was the truth. That's how they really felt. That's what they really thought. And it terrified people, so they had to bury it and they had to soften up their language. In this case, though, he's not softening up his language. He's just lying. We're going to spend a bunch of money, but we're going to pay for it. How? How, buddy? And I'm going to read something from Krista here. It says, hearing him is triggering. He reminds me of those preachers that get all worked up and yell and scream to try and scare you to death about hell. That's, yeah. Yeah, I wish I had a picture of Dark Brandon standing in front of the red podium, all V for Vendetta style, because, whoo, buddy, that was, that would go really well with that. And then and then the sergeant major beat me to the punchline that inflation is the best way to reduce national debt. Yes, friends, that's correct. $30 trillion in debt. What do? Well, we just devalue the currency to the point to where it's really only $10 trillion in debt. Yeah. Is that something that is deliberately being done? Maybe, maybe not. I wouldn't put anything past them. Scott Adams said in a recent live stream that we've come to a point where we've been so abused by our institutions of authority and power that we have to at least consider the possibility that they're up to something nefarious, that that if it looks bad, basically, and you could assume they did the bad thing on purpose, you should at least consider the fact that they did the bad thing on purpose. It's entirely possible. Now, of course, who does that really hurt? Well, the same poor people that the Democrats claim to care about. I mean, if you are in the top 1%, I mean, it sucks that things get more expensive, but you can weather it, and you can also shift your portfolio to try and capture some of the gains that will be realized through inflation. But if you, I don't know, if you were paying child support and just trying to survive in this world, golly, everything getting more expensive sucks. And that's the thing, when things like milk and bread and eggs go up in price, you literally back people into the very corners that Democrats talk about. And Biden said right there, the last guy to have this job, well, let me put it this way. Let me put it this way. Yeah, okay, Biden, let's put it this way. The last guy that was in office up until all that stupid COVID lockdown bullshit, things were going pretty good. It was amazing, in fact, how quickly things started to turn around under the previous guy. Because we had 8 years of Obama, and the 8 years of Obama were all about managing expectations. Oh, well, we're just, America's best days are probably behind it, so, we're just going to only be able to do so good. Besides, you didn't build that, right? Then we had Trump, who said, okay, screw that. I'm just going to get the government out of the way in as many places as possible. And then, surprise, surprise, everything just took off like a rocket. And now we're back to Biden. And Biden is like, he is the worst of several worlds put together. At least Obama was competent. And I know, Obama being competent, ha ha ha. But he was. Everything Obama did was deliberate and calculated. It might have been terrible, but he didn't really do it by accident. Whereas the puppet, whatever you want to call him, I refer to him as the diaper in chief because, good Lord. But Biden doesn't have the mental faculties about him to be able to do these things on purpose. Because look, if you rewind the clocks 25 years and have Biden talk about Biden, even like this is the same guy that was all about, some super predators, for example. That's that's your president. Okay. And then Crackshot says the railroad strike will make inflation worse. So I don't think there's actually going to be a railroad strike. I think there's just too much riding on the railroads. And yeah, I see what I did there with the pun. It would make things worse. But I think railroad companies are about to get paid. Like it's going to happen. They know they've got everything by the balls, and they can point to a lot of their costs going up, and they're. I don't think a strike will happen. I think the threat of a strike will be more than enough. Got Pit Danny in the chat telling me that Union Chiefs just approved a strike. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the railroad strike will happen. Maybe I'm being kind of Pollyannish, but I excuse me, y'all. Maybe I'm being Pollyannish, and that, but I think I'm being realistic. There's just too much at stake. Now, that's not to say that, your wonderful unions that the Democrats love so much. That's not to say that they wouldn't use this as a serious leverage point. I mean, who knows? But I don't see that going very far. And even if they start to strike, I don't think it'll last. I just don't. And again, the Sergeant Major's got some value-added content. He says that's the best time to strike. Yes, strategically, when you can really bust your opponent open, that is the best time. I understand completely. But I also think tinfoil hat territory here. I think the powers that be are going to go out of their way. They're going to go out of their way to avoid the strike for obvious reasons, because we're already looking at a pretty serious wipeout for the Democrats in November. About the only thing that the left has to energize its base is the abortion issue. And, you reach a certain point where it's like, okay, abortion affects a small percentage of people versus the inflation that basically affects everybody. And you can't ignore the fact that when you go to Kroger or Aldi's or whatever, shit costs more money. It just does. Any chance they have, they've created this entire narrative. They want you to look at Donald Trump. They want you to look at the FBI raid in Mar-a-Lago. And, Biden had his Dark Brandon speech where he talked about, the evil MAGA and taking the country backwards and everything else. That's the narrative that they need to be able to push. For whatever reason, rightly or wrongly, the left, the powers that be, they believe that is the path to victory. That's how they retain the House and Senate in a couple of months when the elections happen. So having something like the railroad strike just completely break down, and then I'm seeing some people in the chat saying that talks have broken down. And you got to hit them where they hurt. Yeah, that's true, but that's a negotiation tactic. Like if you're willing to walk away from a deal at any point in time before the deal is complete, you give yourself the best opportunity to get the best deal possible for you. And so all that stuff about, oh man, this didn't work, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that is like, that's negotiation bread and butter. So and this is my guess, and if I'm wrong, as we know, I've said it before, I'm happy to be wrong live on air and then come back later and admit that I was wrong and made a mistake. But I think in this case, the union bosses for the railroads, they know that they've got a strong position. And I think they're going to use it to their advantage. So I think that's it. I was going to play more of the Diaper in Chief's speech here, including the awkward hug that he had as he got past the microphone. And part of what I wanted to talk about this for is, of course, Biden gives a speech talking about how awesome the Inflation Reduction Act is, and just the natural memetics is hysterical. The inflation report comes out, and it's over 8%. It's higher than expected. And then the stock market just, pisses away 1,500 points in a single day. It's funny. The natural memetics. So yeah. Okay. I think that's going to be it, guys. A little frazzled this morning. Haven't done a show solo in quite some time. I think Chris is asking, did somebody just buy us coffee? No. Your calendar just reminded you to go to the beach. Dude, Chris, you're already at the beach. If you need your calendar to remind you to go there, the problem is not whether or not you actually put it on your calendar, bub. Anyhow, so come back tomorrow for Firearms Friday. I think it'll be a little more straightforward of a show. We'll do some GGUs, and we will talk about the fact that Visa and MasterCard want to screw you right over. And I think that's going to be the show. We love you guys. Have a nice day.